The boy was taken under a dark sky. One moment he was on Earth, standing near the broken fence of his home. The next moment he saw a sharp blue light cut through the night. He felt his body freeze, his legs refused to move, and then he was pulled into the air like a leaf in the wind. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer on Earth. He lay inside a cage of shining metal, the floor smooth and cold, the air sharp and strange. Strange voices filled the place, deep and echoing, not like any human sound. Tall figures with long silver armor walked around, their faces hidden under helmets, their eyes glowing yellow. At first he thought they were monsters, but then he understood their words. The boy's heart stopped for a moment. He realized he could understand their language. The aliens called him a pet. They laughed at how small and weak he looked. To them, he was no more than a curious animal. They spoke freely, never hiding their plans, never lowering their voices, and the boy sat quietly, in the cage, pretending not to understand a single word. Inside, however, his mind was racing. Days passed, and the boy was taken through long silver halls deeper into the alien ship. He saw windows showing stars outside, stars brighter than any he had seen on Earth. He knew he was far, far from home. Finally, he was brought into a great chamber. The walls were made of gold and black stone. Strange lights floated in the air, and on a tall throne she sat. The Empress. Her eyes were cold, sharp like blades of ice. She wore armor that looked like fire frozen in metal. Around her stood guards, and servants who bowed low. The boy was pushed forward, his cage placed before her. The alien spoke in her language, telling her that this human was a gift, a rare creature from a forgotten world. They said he could be her new pet. The Empress looked at him for a long time, her lips curved in a faint smile, but her eyes showed no warmth. She raised one hand, and the guards opened the cage, pushing the boy out. He fell on the hard floor, but he stayed quiet, his head bowed. He knew one wrong move could mean his death. To survive, he must remain the pet they believed him to be. The Empress spoke to her, counsel. She said she found the human amusing, small but strange. She said he would stay by her side in the royal palace, a soft companion for long nights. The boy did not react. He only blinked and stared at the floor, but inside his mind caught every word. The council spoke of wars, of broken alliances, of enemies waiting for a chance to strike. They spoke as if he was deaf, but he understood everything. That night, he was placed in the Empress's private quarters. He was given food, strange glowing fruits that tasted like fire and water together. Servants laughed at him, calling him an animal, but no one noticed how carefully he listened. The Empress spoke with her generals, telling them of her fear of betrayal. She spoke of shadowed enemies who wanted her throne. The boy's heart beat faster. He realized he now held a secret power, knowledge, but it was a dangerous gift. If they discovered that he could understand them, they would not keep him alive. So, he lowered his head, ate like a dumb pet, and crawled onto the soft cushion they gave him. But his ears never closed. His eyes never rested. He gathered every whisper, every plan, every lie told in that chamber, and deep inside he made a promise. He would not remain a pet forever. For now, he was silent. For now, he was weak. But one day the Empress would see the truth, and when that day came, the galaxy would tremble. The palace of the Empress was not built for comfort. It was built for power. Its tall walls rose like black mountains, its windows glowed with red firelight. Every hall echoed with the sound of armored boots, every shadow hid watching eyes, and in the middle of this vast empire sat the throne of the Alien Empress. The boy, now her pet, lived close to her throne. He was brought to her chambers every morning, dressed in soft, strange cloth. The aliens thought it was funny to treat him like a doll. To the court, he was nothing but a toy, a creature for their ruler's amusement. But in truth, he was much more, because he understood. The Empress often sat in silence, her back straight, her eyes cold as the frozen stars. She looked at her council and her generals with no sign of fear, but also with no kindness. Her gaze could make even the strongest warrior lower his head. The boy noticed something strange. No one ever looked her in the eyes for long. They feared her, but they also waited for her to fall. When the council gathered, They never guarded their words. The boy sat quietly at her feet, his head bowed. They talked about battles, ships, and broken treaties. They whispered of hidden plots, secret meetings, and dangerous rivals. The Empress never silenced them. She let them speak, as if daring them to betray her. But the boy listened, and every word became a weapon in his mind. One evening, the Empress dismissed her guards. The hall emptied, and for the first time she spoke while looking at the boy. Her voice was sharp, but quiet. "You are small," she said, "but you do not break easily." She leaned forward, her golden crown catching the firelight. Her cold eyes studied him as if searching for something hidden. The boy kept his face blank. He stayed still, like a pet should. But inside, he wondered, did she suspect? Later that night, he lay on the soft cushion near her bed. The chamber was filled with strange blue lights glowing like stars trapped in glass. The Empress spoke again, not to him but to herself. She whispered of her loneliness, of the endless weight of ruling. Her people called her strong, but she was surrounded by knives in the dark. She admitted she trusted no one, not even her generals. The boy's chest tightened. He realized the Empress was powerful but also deeply alone. The next day, the boy saw more than her power. He saw her weakness. During a meeting, a general spoke of victory, but his words carried poison. The boy caught the meaning hidden under the surface. It was not victory they planned, but betrayal. They wanted to use the coming festival. When the palace would be filled with light and distraction, they would strike, and the Empress, for all her cold eyes, seemed unaware. The boy's heart raced. He wanted to warn her, but he could not. If he spoke, if he revealed he understood, she would destroy him. So he stayed silent, his mind heavy with the secret. But that night, when she looked at him again, her eyes sharp and searching, he almost broke. It was as if she knew he carried something inside, something more than the role of a pet. The Empress reached out and touched his hair. Her cold fingers brushed against his head. "You are a quiet one," she said. Her voice was almost soft, but her eyes never softened. In that moment, the boy felt trapped between fear and pity. She was his captor, his enemy, and yet he saw the truth. She was also a prisoner, chained by her throne, chained by her crown. The boy lay awake long after she slept. He stared at the ceiling, glowing faintly with stars. He thought of Earth, of freedom, of the life stolen from him. But he also thought of the Empress, the woman who ruled galaxies yet whispered secrets to the dark. He wondered if fate had tied them together, not as ruler and pet, but as two beings trapped in cages, one golden, one small, and he knew. The day of the festival would change everything. The palace was a world of gold and shadows. Every wall shone. With jewels, every floor was polished like water. But for the boy, it was a cage. A golden cage where he had to act like a pet, though his mind burned with secrets. He lived near the Empress every day. He followed her into the council hall. He sat at her feet when she spoke to her generals. He lay on the cushions of her chamber when she rested. To the court, he was nothing. A toy for their ruler, a soft creature to decorate her throne. But in truth, he was listening, always listening. The boy noticed the palace was alive with whispers. Guards spoke too quickly. Servants glanced too often. He saw generals trade looks behind the Empress's back, and he understood what none of them guessed. The palace was full of knives, waiting for the right moment to strike. One day, as the Empress walked through the hall of banners, two generals spoke behind her, thinking the boy too dumb to care. They mentioned the coming festival, a time of music, fire, and great feasts. The palace would be open, filled with guests, nobles, and commoners, and in that chaos, they said, blood would be spilled. The boy's hands trembled. He knew they planned to kill her. That night, he lay on the cushion near her throne. He watched the Empress speak with her closest counselor. She was calm, her voice sharp, her words full of command. But he saw what others could not. A shadow in her eyes, a weight she could not cast away. She trusted no one, not even the one standing closest to her, and the boy knew she was right not to. The palace prepared for the festival. Bright lights were hung, banners waved in the alien winds. Musicians practiced with strange glowing instruments. The smell of rich food filled the air, but beneath the beauty, danger spread like poison. The boy watched soldiers whisper in corners. He saw new weapons carried under cloaks, and every day his fear grew. The Empress seemed unaware. She held her head high, her voice strong, but sometimes her eyes rested on the boy, as if she could feel something hidden in him, as if she wondered whether he was truly just a pet. The boy lowered his gaze each time. He could not reveal himself, not yet. If he did, his life would end before he could save hers. One evening he followed her into the Garden of Stars. It was a secret place inside the palace where the ceiling glowed with lights. Each light was a star, mapped from the Empire's conquests. The Empress stood under them, silent, her face unreadable. The boy sat near her feet, pretending to be nothing more than a quiet creature, but then she spoke. "Do you know why they fear me?" she asked the night air. No one answered, but still she spoke. "They fear me because I am strong, but strength invites enemies. And one day, even I may fall." The boy's heart beat faster. She knew. She knew someone was coming for her, but she did not know when or who, and he could not warn her. The night before the festival, the palace was louder than ever. Dancers practiced. Firebirds were set free into the air. Servants carried gifts. Nobles arrived with proud banners. But behind the beauty, the boy heard the whispers of death. He saw a guard slip a blade into his sleeve. He saw a servant drop poison into a cup before hiding it away. And he knew the strike would come soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe even before the music ended. He sat quietly at the Empress's side as she prepared for the festival. She wore a crown of fire metal, her armor shining like a storm. Her cold eyes looked at the mirror of black glass. For a moment she seemed more human than ruler. For a moment she looked tired. The boy felt a strange pull in his chest. Pity, fear, and something else he could not name. When the Empress turned to leave, she looked at him once more. Her gaze lingered, sharp and knowing. "You are different," she whispered, so soft the others did not hear. The boy froze. Had she guessed? Had she seen through his act? Her cold eyes narrowed, and then she turned away, walking out of the chamber with her guards, leaving him with a heart heavy with dread. The boy knew the truth now. The festival would not be a celebration. It would be a battlefield hidden under music and lights, and he, a human far from Earth, trapped in a golden cage, was the only one who knew the danger that waited. But what could a pet do when the knives came out? The festival began with fire and music. The great palace of the Empress shone brighter than 100 suns. Drums thundered through the halls. Banners of every color danced in the alien wind. Crowds filled the courtyards. Nobles raised cups of burning wine, and servants moved quickly with trays of food that glowed in the dark. It was a night of celebration, but hidden beneath the joy was a storm of knives. The boy walked close to the Empress, as always. He wore the soft silk they had given him, his head lowered, his steps quiet. To all who looked, he was nothing, a pet, a plaything. But his ears caught every whisper, his eyes searched every shadow, and his heart beat with a fear no one else could see. From the balcony above, the Empress looked down on her people. Her crown of fire metal glowed under the lights. Her cold eyes scanned the sea of faces, never blinking, never softening. The people cheered her name, but in their cheers the boy heard something else. Murmurs of hate, the sharp edge of betrayal. Music rose, and dancers with wings of silver spun in the courtyard. The air shimmered with lights, the ground shook with song. But the boy's gaze caught something in the corner, a servant slipping a dark vial into the golden cup meant for the Empress. His blood froze. He could not speak. He could not shout. If he did, they would know he understood. So he acted the only way he could. He stumbled forward like a clumsy pet. He bumped into the table, knocking the tray aside. The golden cup fell and shattered on the stone floor. The liquid hissed, burning holes where it touched. Gasps filled the air. Servants rushed. Guards barked orders. The boy lowered his head, pretending to be foolish. But inside, he knew he had just saved her life. The Empress's eyes narrowed. For a brief moment she looked at the boy. Her cold gaze seemed to cut through his skin. Did she know? Did she see the truth behind his act? But before she could question, the second strike began. From the far side of the courtyard, a firebird burst into flames. The people cheered, thinking it was part of the show. But in the fire, shadows moved. Assassins cloaked in black armor, they slipped past the guards, blades flashing like moonlight. The boy's heart pounded. He wanted to scream, but his mouth stayed shut. Instead, he crawled closer to the Empress. She sat tall, calm as stone. As the first assassin leapt toward her, the clash of steel filled the night. Guards drew swords, dancers fled, the music broke into chaos. The Empress rose, her hand glowing with fire. She struck, and one assassin fell burning to the ground. But more came. The boy stayed low, watching, waiting. Then he saw it. Another assassin climbing the balcony behind her, a dagger raised high. No one else noticed. No guard looked that way, only him. The boy grabbed a silver plate from the ground. With all his strength, he hurled it at the assassin's head. The plate cracked against the helmet. The assassin stumbled. The dagger missed its mark, slicing only air. The Empress turned, her eyes flashing. She finished the assassin herself with a strike of burning light. But when her gaze returned to the boy, it lingered too long, too sharp, too knowing. The battle raged through the courtyard. Blood stained the golden floor. Fire spread through the banners. Guests screamed and ran as guards fought in the shadows. The boy stayed close to the Empress, always near, always silent. Each time danger came, he found a way to move, to act without words. But each time, her eyes returned to him. She was beginning to see. Finally, the assassins fled, their bodies left behind. Their plot broken, the music had stopped. The festival was drowned in smoke and blood. The Empress stood tall in the middle of it all. Her armor cracked, her crown darkened by fire. Her voice was cold and strong as she commanded her guards. "Find the traitors," she said. Her people bowed, trembling at her power. But when her eyes turned to the boy, they did not tremble. They burned. Later that night, the palace was silent. The fires were put out. The dead carried away. The boy sat on the cushion in her private chamber, his head low. The Empress stood before him, her cloak heavy with blood. For a long time, she said nothing. She only stared at him. Then she whispered, "You are not what you seem." The boy froze. His chest tightened. His breath caught. Did she know? Did she understand the truth? But he lowered his eyes, pretending still, silent, harmless, weak. The Empress leaned closer, her cold eyes searching his face. Her voice was soft, almost dangerous. "One day I will know," she said, and she turned away, leaving him in the shadows of the golden cage. But the boy's heart told him the truth. The game had changed. The Empress no longer saw him as only a pet. She saw him as a mystery, and mysteries were dangerous. The palace was quiet after the failed assassination, but silence in the palace was never peace. It was the silence of fear, the silence of knives hidden in sleeves, the silence of eyes watching from the dark. The Empress survived, but she was no longer blind. She had seen death waiting in her halls. She had felt betrayal in the smiles of her nobles, and she had noticed something else. Her pet, the human, had acted strangely, too strangely, for a creature that was supposed to be dumb. The boy, still, sat at her feet every morning, his head lowered. He still followed her to the council, his hands folded like a harmless child. But her eyes watched him now, sharper than ever. She did not look at him as one looks at a pet. She looked at him as one looks at a secret, and secrets in her court never lived long. One evening she ordered a servant to bring him food, a small bowl of glowing fruit, red as blood. The servant placed it before him, bowing low. The boy lifted one piece, chewing slowly. Then he froze. The Empress spoke in her language, soft but sharp. "The fruit is poisoned," she said to her general. Her eyes flicked to the boy, watching for the smallest sign. The boy's heart thundered, but he kept chewing, calm, empty-eyed. He swallowed, and then reached for another piece. The Empress's lips curved into a faint smile. The fruit was not poisoned at all, but she had seen his reaction, or the lack of it, and it made her wonder. Another day she walked with him through the garden of crystal trees. The branches glowed with blue light. The ground sparkled like ice. She paused and spoke aloud to her advisor. "I think the boy is more than he seems," she said. Her voice was steady, but her gaze was locked on him. The boy kept his head down, plucking at the grass like a mindless pet. Inside, fear burned if he moved wrong. If he blinked too quickly, it would betray him. At night, she tested him again. She left a golden tablet on the floor of her chamber, covered in strange letters. Was a royal order written in her language. The boy sat nearby, pretending to play with the edge of his cushion, but his eyes could not help sliding to the words. Every letter was clear to him. It spoke of traitors in the east, of warships ready to strike. He forced himself to look away, but the Empress was watching from the shadows. Her cold eyes missed nothing. Day after day, her tests grew sharper. Sometimes she whispered secrets while standing close. Sometimes she dropped weapons near him. Once she even spoke a false command to see if he would obey. Always, the boy acted dumb. Always, he kept the mask of silence, but each test cut deeper. He knew she was circling closer and closer to the truth. The Empress was not only powerful, she was clever. Her rule was built on suspicion. She trusted no one, and the boy had become the biggest suspicion of all. Yet even as she tested him, something changed in her gaze. She looked at him longer than before, not only as a threat, but also as something else. When she sat alone, she sometimes spoke to him, not with commands, not with orders, but with fragments of her thoughts. She whispered about her lost childhood, about battles she had fought, about nights she had spent awake wondering which servant would stab her first. The boy listened in silence, his face empty, but inside, he felt her loneliness. It was heavy, heavier than her crown, heavier than her throne. One night, as she dismissed her guards, she turned to him. Her voice was softer than ever before. "You are not like the others I keep," she said. "You do not flinch, you do not beg, you watch, you wait, and sometimes I think you understand more than you should." The boy froze. Every word was a blade, cutting closer to his secret, but he bowed his head, pressing his forehead to the ground, silent, weak, harmless. The Empress stared at him for a long time. Then she laughed. A low, dangerous laugh. "If you are only a pet, then you are the strangest pet I have ever seen," she whispered. Her eyes glowed like cold fire. "Perhaps I will keep you until I know the truth." When she turned away, the boy's hands trembled. The mask had not broken, but the cracks were forming. She was no fool. She would keep testing, and one day the game would end. But as he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of stars, he realized something else. The Empress no longer looked at him only with suspicion. Sometimes, when her eyes softened for a breath, she looked at him with something close to trust, and that trust, as dangerous as it was, might one day save them both. The throne room was never silent for long. Every day, generals shouted, nobles argued, and servants hurried like frightened insects. But when night came, the halls of the palace grew quiet. And in that silence, the Empress revealed more than she wished. The boy lay near her throne, pretending to sleep. But his ears caught her voice. Soft and low, she spoke to no one, or perhaps only to herself. "They call me Empress," she whispered. "They bow before me. They tremble when I look at them. Yet when I close my eyes, I am only a prisoner of my own crown." The boy did not move. He knew she would never speak these words if she thought he understood, but each word pressed into his heart. He had seen her, as cold, cruel, untouchable. Yet now he saw something else. A woman chained by her power, a ruler surrounded by enemies, a queen who slept beside daggers every night. The Empress's days were full of tests, not only for her human pet, but for her court as well. She set traps for her generals. She watched every whisper. She dismissed old advisors and raised new ones. But no matter how strong she acted, the boy could see the truth. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders bent under a weight no one else could carry. One evening she called for no counsel, no guards. She sat in the garden of stars, her cloak spread across the stone. The boy sat near her feet, quiet as always. Above them, the ceiling glowed with constellations of her empire. Each star marked a world she ruled. Each light was a victory, yet her face showed no pride, only a deep, unspoken sorrow. "Do you know what it costs to rule a galaxy?" she said to the empty air. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glimmered like glass. "It costs friends, it costs family, it costs trust. In the end, there is only the throne, and the throne is colder than any star." The boy lowered his gaze, but his heart tightened. He thought of Earth, of his family, of the warmth of home. He thought of how alone she must have been, surrounded by riches yet starved of kindness, and for the first time, he felt not only fear of her, but pity. Still, the palace was no safer. In fact, danger grew with every passing day. The boy overheard messengers from the outer systems. They spoke of a rival empire, a fleet of warships gathering beyond the borders, a power older than hers, hungrier than hers. They whispered of a coming storm. The boy listened and dread filled his chest. The Empress had survived betrayal inside her walls, but soon a greater enemy would strike from beyond. That night, he watched her in her private chamber. She removed her crown, setting it on the table of black stone. For a moment, without the fire metal on her head, she looked smaller, younger, almost human. She touched the edge of her cloak, her hands trembling. The boy had never seen her hands shake. Before, it was as if the armor she wore before the world cracked in the quiet of night. She turned her eyes to him suddenly. "You sit there like a shadow," she said, her voice low. "You do not speak. Yet sometimes it feels as if you hear me." The boy kept his head bowed. His silence was his shield. But inside he felt the weight of her words. Her loneliness reached for him like cold fingers. And though he dared not answer, he wished he could. The next day the court was loud with arguments. The Empress stood tall, her voice sharp, her commands iron. But the boy saw what the others did. Not behind her strength was fear. Fear of the rival empire, fear of the knives still hidden in her palace. Fear that the golden cage she had built for others was closing around her as well. Later she dismissed the court and sat alone with him once more, her eyes softened for only a breath. "You are different," she whispered. "You stay close. You watch. You do not betray." She looked away quickly, as if ashamed of her own words. But the boy felt them like fire in his chest. For the first time she had spoken of trust, a fragile trust, but trust nonetheless. That night, he could not sleep. He lay awake on his cushion, staring at the ceiling of stars. The Empress slept nearby, her crown on the table, her breath heavy with exhaustion, and he made a silent promise. He would not let her fall to her enemies, not the traitors inside, not the empire beyond, and not the loneliness that slowly killed her heart. But deep inside, he knew the truth. To keep that promise, one day he would have to break his silence. One day he would have to show her he understood. And when that day came, the galaxy would never be the same. The storm came without warning. The night sky above the palace split open with fire. Great warships of the rival empire descended like black eagles. Their weapons glowing red, the golden. Towers shook. The ground trembled and the sound of alarms filled every hall. The boy was with the Empress when the first strike hit. She stood tall on the balcony, her cloak whipping in the wind. Her generals shouted orders, her guards rushed with weapons. But even she, the woman who ruled galaxies, looked for a moment like a figure carved in stone, because this enemy was not a whisper in her court. This was a storm that came from beyond the stars. Explosions lit the sky, pieces of fire rained down into the palace gardens, servants screamed and ran, nobles fled. But worse than the ships above were the traitors within. As the rival empire attacked from the outside, her own guards turned their blades from within. The boy's blood turned cold. The palace was falling. The Empress drew her sword, fire dancing. Along its edge her cold eyes blazed, her voice thundered above the chaos. "Hold the palace," she commanded. Her words shook the hall, but the boy knew. Too many enemies had gathered, too many knives waited for this moment. He stayed close to her, crawling like a harmless pet. But his mind burned with fear and decision. If he stayed silent, she would die. If he spoke, his secret would be revealed. The mask he had worn for so long would shatter. And yet, the choice was already made in his heart. A group of traitor guards broke through the chamber doors, their weapons aimed at the Empress. She stood ready, her blade raised, but one guard slipped behind her, dagger high. The boy's body moved before his mind. He leapt, knocking the blade aside. The dagger cut his arm, but the Empress was spared. The guard snarled, striking again, and in that moment the boy spoke. "Behind you," he shouted. The word echoed in her language, sharp and clear. The hall froze. The Empress turned, eyes wide with shock. Her pet had spoken, not in cries, not in human tongue, but in her own language. With a roar, she struck down the traitor, but her gaze returned to him, blazing with 1,000 questions. "You," she whispered. "You understand." The boy's secret was broken, but there was no time to explain. More traitors stormed the hall, and from above, the rival empire's warships fired again. The palace roof cracked, stone fell like thunder. The Empress's crown shattered against the floor. The boy grabbed her arm. "Follow me," he shouted. For the first time he gave orders instead of silence. The Empress hesitated, but then she saw his eyes, clear, steady, unafraid, and she followed. Through smoke and fire he led her down hidden passages. He had listened for weeks. He knew the secret halls the generals thought he had not understood. He knew where the traitors gathered, where the guards whispered of tunnels and escape routes. Now his knowledge became her shield. They ran through halls of broken glass, through gardens burning with falling fire. Everywhere the enemy closed in. The Empress fought with her blade, the boy guided with his voice. "Left here," he said. "Down the stairs. Not that door. It's trapped." She obeyed, her trust growing with each step. Finally, they reached the lower chambers, but even there the rival empire's soldiers waited, their armor black as night, their weapons glowing like suns. The Empress raised her sword, ready to fight until death, but the boy stepped forward. His voice cut the silence. "There is another way," he said. He pointed to a hidden gate carved into the stone. The Empress's eyes widened. Few in her court even knew of it, but he had listened, he had learned. They escaped into the tunnels, the ground shaking above them. The Empress walked beside him, her sword still burning, but her cold eyes now carried something new. Not suspicion, but respect. At last she spoke, her voice low. "You were never a pet," she said. "You were a shadow, watching, waiting, and now you have saved me." The boy lowered his gaze. "I was silent because silence kept me alive," he said. "But I will not be silent anymore." The Empress looked at him for a long time. Then for the first time her lips curved, not in cruelty, but in something close to a smile. "You are mine no longer," she whispered. "You are more than a pet, perhaps more than even I deserve." Above them the palace burned, the galaxy shook, with the war to come. But in the dark tunnels side by side, the Empress and the boy walked forward, no longer ruler and pet, but two allies bound by trust and fire. And together, they would face the storm,